It is a hot summer day here in Southern California. We thought we had a break, and it's not quite. It's like 100 degrees today, and and next week we have the very last fight of Floyd Mayweather's career. Now, Floyd Mayweather, the former WBC super featherweight, WBC lightweight, WBC super lightweight, IBF welterweight, former IBF welterweight, WBC welterweight 2 times, WBC super welterweight 2 times, WBO welterweight, WBA super welterweight champion, Floyd Mayweather, the guy who has 4 lineal titles, including twice the lineal champion at welterweight. And he'll be fighting Andre Berto, former Olympic qualifier and former WBC welterweight title holder. For this podcast, we're going to assume that this really is Floyd Mayweather's last fight, because if we follow the typical boxing pattern, it's that Mayweather's going to say he's retiring, and he's really not, and he's going to come back for some lucrative fight, and maybe he wins, and we see him disappear again for another year, and then he comes back again. That's how retirements typically work, and we're not going to do that. We're going to take Mayweather at his word. He seems like he's legit about that on Twitter and all of his social media, and all of his people are saying as much. And when you look at it from that point of view, the way this fight will occur changes a bit. Maybe it's true. He does want to go out in a soft touch. Maybe he just wants to get rid of the contract. Maybe he wanted to retire after he beat Pacquiao, and he's just got this one fight left on his CBS contract. So under that assumption, are you guys okay with this fight?
Yes.
Well, that's Dean. And let me introduce who we got here with us, since you guys may not recognize that voice. It's Dean. Also here is Simon. Also here is Adam. Dean, you said yes first. So why are you okay with this fight? Because there's a lot of criticism out there that Andre Berto is...
I know I'm going to draw criticism for saying yes, but it's going to be a more competitive fight than Pacquiao was.
Wait, what?
There's a bold one.
How'd you figure?
Because Berto has fuck all to lose in this fight.
Mm-hmm.
So
he had fuck all to lose against Jesus Soto Carras too, and he lost that one.
Well, actually, he lost the use of one of his arms.
Yeah,
well.
He had a legitimate shoulder injury. A legitimate one.
I think that it might be more entertaining, but I don't think that it'll be closer.
This will be more like Maidana than Pacquiao in terms of the fight.
That's a good point. Who was more competitive against Mayweather, Maidana in the first fight or Pacquiao?
Maidana.
Still Pacquiao, I think. Maidana got off good. No, definitely not, because Maidana pushed the issue and had, pockets of success, but Pacquiao... I don't think so. I think Pacquiao forced Mayweather into his ultra-conservative defensive network that, is a bit of a snooze fest for more lay audiences, but it shows that he's working at his maximum capacity rather than...
I think it's close between those two fights, but Maidana pushed him more, clearly. And he was in more sort of discomfort, not ever in trouble. It's not like he was really hurt, but... he had to do way more adjusting and thinking and working in that first Maidana fight than he did in Pacquiao. After a round or two in Pacquiao, that motherfucker was in cruise control for the rest of the fight, and it was just game over. You can't say that about Maidana. He had to work hard to figure that fight out, and obviously he did. I
think the opposite. I think he took Maidana to try and put on an entertaining fight and took risks with that fight because he felt safe enough to do it. And that with the Pacquiao fight, it was him in his most, he couldn't afford to lose a round at that point. It had too much, talking and speculation over the years that he wanted to put on absolutely flawless performance. Whereas against Maidana, he wanted to take risks, be exciting, and show a wider range of his talents. So I don't think that necessarily the level of interest or adjustment reflects on the stress he was put under. If he was worked harder in Maidana, it's because he chose to be.
That's a great point, Simon. I think we can all agree with that one. In the specific part where you said he wanted to shut down Pacquiao and make sure it was clear to everybody that Pacquiao, and I'm going to change your words a little here, was completely outclassed, and it proved to everybody that he was never on his level. And I think he did accomplish that. I think as far as how it occurred for us, the trouble he was in, it looked like he was in way more trouble against Maidana. But I'm not sure that was necessarily because Maidana was that much better on fight night than Pacquiao. Now, I don't even remember what we were talking about.
Well, you
Yeah.
asked.
Dean
So
said that Berto's going to be more competitive.
well, you asked in the beginning, the way you started it off is by asking, "Are we okay with this fight?" And Dean went out on a limb and said, "Yes."
Well,
I'm
hold
gonna
on. Let me just finish that then. The reason why I'm okay with this fight is because there is literally nobody else left to fight. He has beaten every single person that you could put in front of him with regards to weight or size, except for Antonio Margarito, who uses fucking plaster. He's fought everybody. The
Well,
timing is
some
relevant. He
jerks
fought
will
Shane
say Paul
Mosley.
Williams.
He fought Shane. Well, that's not going to happen now, is it?
Go on.
He fought Shane Mosley, who had like an 84% knockout percentage for his wins. So he's fought big punchers. He fought Canelo, who was like 20 pounds heavier than him on fight night. He fought Pacquiao. He fought Maidana twice. He fought Castillo twice. He fought Hatton, who was undefeated.
I agree that he's got a very accomplished resume, but in terms of there's nothing out there for him to do, there's Kell Brook, there's Keith Thurman, Amir Khan, Timothy Bradley, Saddam Ali. If you want to go to a young up and comer, there's options out there, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Why do you guys think it is Berto? So I think it's pointless to argue who we could have taken, because guess what? He's fighting Berto next Saturday, and it's too late to change it. So what was the justification? Like, you got to put yourself in Mayweather, Al Heyman, all of the guys who were involved in the selection of this opponent. Why Berto?
I think it's Berto because Berto's cheap and easy.
And compliant.
Yeah, exactly. And he's Heyman's boy. Heyman's hooked up Andre Berto with, well, let's be serious about it, with his title belt that he held. And with some easy fights, and made Andre Berto a lot of money. And so if Al Heyman says, listen, you're taking this Mayweather fight and you're going to get the best payday, you're going to take an L and move on in your career, that he does that. So, yeah, he's compliant in terms of the terms. He's cheap. He doesn't represent a lot of risk. And that's why, in a way, we should probably be rejecting your premise, Angelo, that this is his last fight, because I think I just don't see this being the capstone fight. There's nothing interesting to it that makes it a capstone fight. And so, you were asking about, are we okay with it? And I think the answer is basically no, and here's why. So Andre Berto is famously 3-3 in his last 6 fights. He's got losses to Victor Ortiz, Robert Guerrero, and Jesus Soto Carras. Yes, maybe one arm, but still. So he's got 3 losses in his last 6. Anybody want to venture a guess when the last time Floyd Mayweather fought somebody with 3 losses in their last 6 fights was?
Manny Pacquiao?
No, close, but
Didn't
no.
he say that? Didn't he? Or somebody said that in an interview this past week. Go on.
He would have had 2 losses, maybe 1.5, if you want to be more honest about the Timothy Bradley thing. The last time he fought somebody with 3 losses in their last 6 was the year 2000. Emmanuel Augustus, the drunken master. And he's never fought somebody with 3 losses in their last 6 in a title fight. This is the first time he's ever taking somebody on with this thin a recent resume at anything like this level. And so I think it puts some sort of context around the fact that this really is a soft touch fight. And I don't really see it as the sort of cornerstone thing to cap off his career. I see it as burning off his Showtime contract, and then he comes back for some big network fight or a Pacquiao rematch or whatever it is.
Can I just ask you something in response to that then? What more do you expect from him? Because he's a 12-time world champion, 4-time lineal champion. He's fought undefeated fighters along the way, right? Well, yeah, you can argue 5-time if you want. And then he always fights his biggest fights in May. And then he sort of had like a little cooling off fight in September. And then he comes back and does another big one in May. What more do you want? Did anybody really expect this to be a huge fight? I didn't.
I mean, I think whether it's fair or not, we hold guys like Mayweather, who are clearly at the pinnacle of the sport, to a higher standard. And, I don't expect him to take on, we can all joke about how the Pacquiao fight went, but at the time, obviously, that was clearly far and away the best challenge to him, and probably, at least on paper, was likely to be the best one he'd had in a long time. I don't necessarily expect him to take that on, but I expect him to take on somebody that has something interesting. And so I know we bullshit about this a lot, but people talk about, okay, well, Amir Khan's got hand speed, and maybe you'd have to adjust to that. Or, Keith Thurman ostensibly has, power. Maybe he'd adjust to that. Or somebody who has a size advantage like Canelo or whatever. We expect him to do something to push himself. And he's not doing any of that against Berto. Berto's smaller than him. Berto doesn't have crazy power. He doesn't have crazy hand speed. He's obviously got the shaky recent resume. There's nothing about Berto that's going to test him. And I think we expect generally people like that to test themselves.
I think you were going to pick an opponent for this fight, which he should have been. I would have gone with Miguel Cotto rematch.
I'd love to see that fight.
Take that middleweight belt and retire. Done.
Well, if you listen to him and what he actually says, Floyd's been really clear that his goal is to get out of boxing making as much money as he can and with his health intact. And I think after Pacquiao, I doubt he's ever trained harder. I doubt he's ever pushed himself to that limit. I think he's done. I really do think that he's reached that point where he's like, I've done everything. Give me the last fight, whoever you want, and it doesn't need to be a big fight. I'm not demanding anything, and I'm going to win this fight, and I'm getting out of this.
I believe that he believes that right now, but I've also seen enough times when people retire and they get a bit stir crazy. They've still got the drive and they just want to go out and do it again. It's brilliant to think about, and it's really enticing, I'm sure, because he's been a professional for so long, to think, yeah, this is it, going to retire. But the thing is, once you do it and you get to the other side of the hill, you realize it's boring. And then when you think, I could come back and do one and earn more money and have even more money than I have currently, it becomes an appealing idea. So I believe that he is committed at the minute to making this his last one. But I also think that there's a very high probability that somewhere down the line, maybe not necessarily soon, but maybe in a year's time, he thinks, I will do one more.
So if next year, if Vladimir Klitschko, let's say he beats Fury, and next year he says, this is my last fight, I'm going to do a goodbye fight in Germany or in Ukraine, and that's it for me, and he took on somebody like
Gary Cornish.
Probably not Gary Cornish, but maybe Manuel Char. Give him a nice payday to pay for those medical bills.
Again? We fought him already.
I know, but let's just, I can't think of a heavyweight with like 3 or 4 losses. I mean, basically somebody who's...
David Price.
Let's say he fights David Price.
Seth Mitchell.
That's Chris Areola. How about that? he decides to fight Chris Areola in Ukraine. He says, I'm done. How much criticism does he get?
0.
Is it as much as what Mayweather's getting right now?
Not even close.
No, I think Mayweather's always going to attract the highest level of criticism for whatever perceived slight or actual slight he does. But I think that it's an okay fight. One of the things that people are upset about is the pay-per-view element of this fight. And people are saying, why wouldn't they put it on free TV? They wouldn't put it on free TV because there's a bunch of people out there that are going to pay for this. And whether you like it or not, it's the market's fault. The market pays for silly things. And if that's true, which it is, they'll continue to do it. You had like Cards Against Humanity sold like 30,000 boxes of poo and like successfully sold them. People will buy shit. So this is going to be on pay-per-view for that reason.
Yeah, I think part of it is that they sort of teased everybody with this idea that it would be on network TV. And when they floated the Andre Berto thing, when it first happened, I honestly just assumed it was a trial balloon, the same way he floated Devin Alexander a while ago, and there was this huge uproar, and it was like, just kidding, I'm going to fight Maidana. I thought it was sort of a fake out. And so they kind of, I think that they built people up a little bit to thinking maybe this would be on network TV.
See, I remember the talks about that, but I don't remember it coming from their camp ever. Like anyone the only speculation to that end I heard was from fans or commentary people or people that are not necessarily intimately in the loop.
Yeah, well, Mayweather's team doesn't usually talk that much about this stuff publicly, but I don't know. I mean, you hear these rumors, and listen, there's rumors about everything. But
so you think the public set itself up with an expectation because of a rumor that they themselves generated and are now outraged that their
No,
own rumor didn't.
I think what it is like if the sort of the combination of the two rumors of Andre Berto and network TV fight made sense, and it was like, all right, cool, I could get down with that. Berto on network TV, get millions and millions of fans to watch it. That'd be cool. It'll be a good way to sort of make up for what was to casual fans a shitty fight in Mayweather Pacquiao. And then when you have that fight, that matchup, Mayweather Berto, but it's on pay-per-view, it's just kind of like, oh shit, And so I think that's part of the backlash too.
Well, the problem with putting it on network TV, which a lot of people don't realize, is that it didn't make any sense to put it on network TV. There's so much competition on network TV that night with college football. I mean, it's week 2 of college football. You have the number 5 team in the country facing the number 7 team on ABC at the same time that fight's going to be on. Do they really want to compete there, or do they want to say, hey, boxing fans, do you want to watch this? You guys are probably the only ones that are going to order this anyway. All 1 million of you who actually order fights, you're going to order it on CBS. And you were going to do that anyway, no matter if he was fighting Berto or Khan or Chris Algieri or whoever.
Well, but that competition exists anyway. I mean, college football is still happening the night of this pay-per-view.
Right, so, but see, we were all going to watch anyway. We're going to watch if it's on pay-per-view or not. So why not make us pay for it?
Yeah,
that's like the smarter business move here. Is it cool? No, because who wants to spend $70 on a predictable fight? But at the very least, though, this is a very good undercard. I mean, I've not seen a pay-per-view. I can't remember a pay-per-view card that's been as good as this one. Maybe
was it Brooke Gavin?
I was about to say the Brooke. Was that pay-per-view? The Brooke Gavin
Gavin was. Yeah, it was pay-per-view over here, and it had like AJ on the undercard.
That was Kevin Mitchell and Linares.
Kevin Mitchell, Linares,
Selby and Gradovich. Okay. I would say that this one's better.
How so?
The fights are even. Martinez versus Salido, that's an even fight. Groves, Jack, who knows how that one's going to go. Groves looks like, he can win this fight. And Groves does have the tools to win this fight, but who knows? Groves looks like already like he's, I don't want to say he's shot, but like he's a wounded animal post Froch. And then there's the Gonzalez versus Oquendo fight where, what is going on with Johnny Gonzalez? That could be interesting. The Martirosyan versus Ishe Smith. Those are all good fights.
I don't know. Martirosyan fight might be a little bit brutal to watch.
That's why they're not putting it on the pay-per-view broadcast. But I know you'll watch the Showtime Extreme portion.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is you ask like who wants to spend $70, and the answer is assholes like us. So there's a whole lot of joking about I'm going to boycott this fight and everything, but I don't think I'm going to boycott this fight. I know how Floyd Mayweather is going to fight. I have a pretty good idea of how he's going to win. And yet watching the master ply his craft is still a pretty amazing thing to do. And so I don't know. It's hard to not want to watch it. And of course, that's what makes Simon absolutely right, that the reason they put it on pay-per-view is because enough people like me will pay for it.
And this is the last time, maybe, that we see a master like Mayweather apply his craft. Whether you want to believe it or not, whether you like Mayweather or not, the guy is an absolute master in the ring. There's been nobody better in this generation than him. Are you really going to boycott his last fight? I don't care who.
Yeah.
If you're a boxing fan, there's no way you miss this fight because it's on pay-per-view or because it's Andre Berto. I wouldn't miss any Pacquiao fight. I wouldn't miss Marquez's fight no matter who he's fighting in his next fight.
I think if money's no object, that's obviously the case. But, there's a lot of people who can't afford to be shelling out 70, 80, $100 every time there's pay-per-views like this. And when you add it all up with all the subscriptions, it gets pretty rough.
I think people, if you're a boxing fan and you're on a budget, you'd be in a sports bar that's playing this on the night of the fight.
Or you can go to a theater where it's $20.
Yeah, if you guys haven't done that, you should really try it. It's a pretty fun experience. I hope they do that with Berto. They did it with, that's how I watched Mayweather Cotto.
No, it's in theaters.
Yeah, they didn't do it, I don't think, with Pacquiao, but it's a great way to watch a fight. So For all the listeners out there who haven't done it, you can get a movie ticket and go and get some picture quality that's not like you get at home.
Fathomevents.com if you're somebody who wants to order it, or not order it, but see it in a theater. Simon, you have a point to make, though.
Yeah?
Oh, it sounded like you were getting ready to talk.
Well, it was just that the people who talk about boycotting fights, I always picture them out to be people that we're going to stream it anyway illegally. By boycott, they mean still stream it illegally, but feel somehow morally justified in doing so now.
That sounds about right to me.
Yeah, and there's a big portion of boxing fans out there, especially the ones who are vocal on the internet, because you got to kind of know a bit about the internet to stream a fight. And that's fine. I mean, those were accounted for anyway. Those are the guys who don't come in and get counted on the HBO and the Showtime numbers that we get, or in any of the pay-per-view buy rates. I mean, if you stream, you stream. You're going to stream. But if I take Mayweather at his word, though, I'm fine with Berto, and I'm fine with paying for this last fight. It helps that the undercard's good.
Yeah, well, that's no accident. They're making the undercard good on this one in a way that they haven't paid as much attention to. Although I will say that for Mayweather undercards, they've generally been better than Pacquiao undercards, which have just been comical disasters for the most part.
Well, isn't Bob Arum the one who's been quoted as saying, nobody cares about the undercard, so I put on whatever I want?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he's not wrong. Again, we get to Simon's point that the market is what dictates this stuff, and people are buying those fights for Pacquiao. They're not buying it for, Timothy Bradley fighting, somebody on the undercard to try to build up. They don't care about that stuff.
Yeah, it is rare to care about the undercard. People who own tickets, you see the stadium empty until sort of the fight immediately before, when people have, deemed it worthy to show up to their event. I get grief off people when I'm out and about if I can't watch a fight at home, if I'm out somewhere else, and they say, "Why are you watching that? That's not the main event. The main event's in 2.5 hours. Why are you watching?" And it seems almost alien to people to pay attention to the undercard. So I love a good undercard, but we are definitely in the minority.
Assuming that this is Mayweather's last fight, where do you guys rate Mayweather all time?
Ooh.
Dean, you're going first.
I'll go last.
Okay. Simon.
Right. Yeah, I'll start by being awkward and saying that I don't particularly like the idea of all-time, all-weight rankings, because there's just no real way to be objective about it. It's always going to be spattered with your subjective opinions of that era, or how strong or weak it may have been according to you. I mean, objectively, Mayweather's record isn't too dissimilar to Ali's record at that point in time, and people are going to be hissing, booing, turning this off at that point. But it's correct. If you look at how many titles, title fights, defenses, things like that, statistically they marry up, and people are going to mention the great names that Ali fought against. Yeah, fine, but you don't know that in 50 years' time, people are going to be citing, Canelo as this huge win, which, in fairness, is a good win. And just people don't want to give it the dues that it's worth at the minute. So, objectively, he probably is going to be rated fairly highly if you did it, mathematically, and did it on defenses. In terms of subjective, I don't know. It's difficult to predict. Right now, everyone's going to make an excuse to put him as low as possible just out of blind hatred, but they're wrong. And those same people in 20, 30 years' time are going to be kinder to him, I think, and put him higher up. I don't think there's an argument to make him the best, but it's certainly up there.
So I'm going to give you a numerical range at least. I haven't looked at, a top 50 or 100 list or something recently, but off the top of the head, I say he's got to be in that sort of top 15 to maybe 25 range all time. He's not the best ever. He's not, Sugar Ray Robinson. He's not some of those guys that are way at the top. But he's got an overall career that, so we talk about the prospect of 50-0 to surpass Rocky Marciano. I think his career is probably on a par with Rocky Marciano, and depending on where you rank Marciano, he's in that range. Somebody like, say, George Foreman, who probably falls around that 20 mark somewhere. I think Mayweather's career is probably roughly as good as George Foreman. So I think that's probably where he levels out, unless we see him come back and, as a genius commenter suggested, fight Gennady Golovkin, Sergey Kovalev, and who knows, maybe Vladimir Klitschko. If he rails off some other wins, then he moves up that list. But I'd say somewhere in maybe that 15, 20, 25, if you're being not generous range.
See, I got to disagree on Marciano purely because, I mean, in terms of defenses, what's he had title defenses like, I don't know, 10, 15?
Who, Marciano or Mayweather?
Yeah. No, Marciano.
I mean, I don't know off the top of my head how many defenses he had, but I think that a lot of people look at the kind of opposition that he faced and some of the all-time greats that he put down, people like Walcott and whoever. So that's what makes up that.
Walcott on one leg with one eye. But
when did Mayweather first pick up a belt, though? Are we talking someone who's held one for 15 years plus at this point?
I have the number, Simon. So Mayweather, when he beats Berto on Saturday, or if he beats Berto, that'll be 26 title fights in which he went undefeated. That's 26 title defenses, ranging from 1 title to 4 titles to a lineal title to not. 26-0.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you're trying to stack up, I mean, I don't remember the ins and outs of Rocky Marciano's career, but some of the highlights, guys like Joe Louis, Walcott, we mentioned, Ezra Charles, Archie Moore, these are all-time greats themselves that he beat. But anyway, I think that regardless of how we parse that out, I think the point is that they're both clearly in the same kind of range of the conversation. And so Mayweather certainly should not fall any lower than maybe, 25 or 30 or something. But I'd be pretty surprised if somebody put him in the top 10 and started bumping out some of those guys.
I'd be surprised if they didn't. He's got to be in the top 10, surely. We're talking about someone who's had a belt at world level, undefeated for, 16 years?
Yeah, but I mean, Sugar Ray Leonard's not even in the top 10 for most people. You think he had a better career than Sugar Ray Leonard?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's a bold statement there.
Well, I mean, Floyd did not lose to his Roberto Duran.
Yeah, I mean, sure, Sugar Ray Leonard has losses on his career that Floyd never had, but he also had arguably the greatest, year and a half in recent sports history, beating Benitez, Duran, Thomas Hearns. Yes, Marvin Hagler. You're goddamn right. I'm going to say Marvin Hagler.
But that didn't happen in the span of a year. You just said it.
Well, that one was
later. Did you misspeak?
No, that one was later, obviously. That was much later in his career. But I don't know. I mean, we could sit here and fight about this stuff forever. I'd be pretty surprised if people put him above Sugar Ray, but to each their own.
Leonard, I'd have him above Sugar Ray Leonard.
Well, I'd go have him above
not Robinson.
I would.
You'd have Mayweather above Robinson?
I'd have Mayweather above anybody.
Wow.
Really?
Really.
Like,
how so?
Really?
Well, you want to know why?
Yeah.
All right,
that
let
would
me
be
ask
helpful.
you, what is the aim in boxing?
Make lots of money?
No, come on. Go right down to it. What is the point of boxing?
To win.
To hit and not get hit. Nobody does it better. Nobody has done it better. Look at the records as well. 25-0 in world title fights. 12-0 against lineal titleists. 23-0 against former or current world titleists. Nobody has done better than that, ever. And then you look at the caliber of opposition he's faced. You look at the guys like Joe Louis or Marciano or Robinson. They weren't fighting fights back-to-back like that. Okay, they were fighting a lot more frequently, but they weren't fighting the same caliber of opponent. They weren't fighting Alvarez, Cotto, Mosley, Marquez, Hatton, De La Hoya, Pacquiao. They weren't fighting all these huge names. They called it Bum of the Month Club for a reason. You know?
Yeah,
you want to go back through time, I would put Mayweather, I would favour him above any welterweight there has ever been. Ever.
I think that's fair. I think though you'll struggle to make an argument that bests out people like Sugar Ray Robinson, probably
People-
Archie Moore.
Robinson.
I think it's Muhammad Ali. I mentioned is probably on par.
Well, people can't argue for Robinson or Moore or anybody else around that time or Dempsey because there's not enough footage of those guys. There's a couple of tapes.
But if you used a sort of chess style ELO system to rank them against their opposition at the time, they'd have to come out relatively, or if not better.
People say about Ali, he was great for what he did out for the sport, not just in the sport, what he did for the sport. Look at what Mayweather's done for the sport. There's more money in the sport now than there's ever been, and most of that is down to Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah, but do you think that people give Muhammad Ali credit in his overall ranking for the outside the ring stuff, or do you think it's the inside the ring?
Way too much credit for what he did outside of the ring. Way too much.
Well, totally, it adds to his popularity, but his record speaks for itself.
What, he lost to a guy with 7 fights?
Yeah, this was severely late in his career, wasn't it?
We can nitpick anybody's career if we want, but I mean, if you look at the wins over all-time greats that somebody like Ali has, it's like Archie Moore, Sonny Liston, obviously all the guys in his later career, Joe Frazier, George Foreman, arguably Ken Norton, maybe.
All right.
But sort of.
Would you say the following fighters will be in the Hall of Fame someday? Zab Judah.
No.
De La Hoya's already in there. Gatti's already in there. You know where I'm going with this. Pacquiao.
Yeah.
Do you think Mosley gets in?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a great lightweight.
For that win over Mayorga, right?
That was the one that sealed it.
Cotto gets in. Hatton gets in.
Canelo
Wait, you
is
just
on his
smuggled
way.
Hatton in. How did that happen?
Yeah,
Hatton's getting
borderline.
in. Hatton's getting in.
Hatton will get in.
He will get in. Gotti's in. Come on.
Yeah, but Gotti was beloved in a way that, I don't know, I guess Hatton
Are
was
you
beloved
serious?
in his own way.
Are you going to pull that one out that Gotti was loved in a way that Hatton wasn't? Hatton packed 80,000, 100,000 people into soccer stadiums in the UK, and you're going to talk about Gotti, who sold out, Bally's in Atlantic City, Boardwalk Hall?
I was going to make the point that he might get in on the song alone, Hatton.
Mayweather was a world champion when half of the fucking sub were in nappies.
Simon
He was a
Woodard
world
nappies.
champion in 1998.
Diapers for you Americans.
Yeah, thanks for the translation there.
He's held titles at 2 separate weights for years.
Yes, he's fought for them both in the same fight, actually.
Yeah, he did that. Leonard
WBA.
did that. Mayweather did that.
It's the only explanation there is WBA.
Yeah, I think he's up there. Don't get me wrong. I think that you're closer to the truth than where the general consensus is, which is that everyone just says like, "Oh, I put him about 20," and then you say, "Well, who are these 19 people above him?" And so, I don't know, but I feel it in my soul that he should be 20 of all time.
I could probably name off at least 10 off the top of my head that I think should
see,
clearly be above.
How many? Let's see how many you can do. Go.
All
and
right,
we'll
so
laugh if you mess up.
Sugar Ray Robinson,
Mm-hmm.
Sugar Ray Leonard, Muhammad Ali, Joe Louis, Jack Dempsey.
Yeah.
Oh, how many Jack Dempsey fights have you seen?
I'm
Henry
not big
Armstrong.
on Dempsey or Armstrong being up there.
Henry Armstrong, Willie Pep, probably, I don't know.
What are
Where
you
we
at?
going
You're
after
struggling.
this?
You're blowing out at like
Rocky
7, aren't you?
Rocky Marciano.
No,
You aren't even
no.
convinced about
Marciano's
a
not
couple
above
of
Mayweather.
Archie
You're not
Moore,
convinced on all of these. Yeah,
Archie Moore,
Moore,
George
fair play.
Foreman.
Nah, really?
These are people that I think are like pretty clearly either above him or right in that range. And you're already talking,
Willie
8, 9,
Pep.
10 people. So I don't think he's number 1. I don't think he's number 2, 3, or 5.
I think you
Yeah, and
were
I think
only
that's
convinced
fair.
of maybe 4 or 5 guys. The rest of them, you were throwing them out. It was like, yeah, I think he's about in that range. Give or take 20 rankings.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, obviously, none of us are contemporaries of Willie Pep. None of us have probably seen a ton of footage of any of these guys. And so how do we measure them? We measure them by what kind of wins they had, what was sort of the arc of their career. And I think that if you look at Floyd Mayweather's career, listen, it's obvious that he's an incredible fighter. It's obvious that he's the best of this generation. How many wins does he have over Hall of Famers and all-time greats? And he definitely has some. He's got, probably, I don't know, 6 or 8 guys who would have an argument for the Hall of Fame. In terms of, all-time greats, I mean, there's Pacquiao. I don't think you could call Oscar De La Hoya an all-time great exactly, but
he's on the list. If we were making a list of the greatest fighters of all time, if the list was deep enough, like 50 to 100, I think we could throw Oscar on there.
Maybe Shane Mosley. I mean, you could have to argue whether or not Shane Mosley was close enough to his prime. I wasn't before, but after last week, I'm throwing him on there. He knocked out Mayorga's teeth. And obviously Juan Manuel Marquez, but like the list gets pretty thin after that. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that guys like Canelo are great fighters. I think that Ricky Hatton was a great fighter. I think that Zab Judah, had his merits. But these are guys who are a lower tier.
How dare you leave off Cotto?
That's how. Well, of course, Cotto. There you go. Cotto's probably up in that De La Hoya range. And so you have to sort of judge them against the wins that they had and what the sort of arc of their career was. Mayweather gets positive points because he's never lost and never been particularly close to losing. And he gets positive points because at this point he really has sort of cleaned out the entirety of boxing, and we're all kind of nitpicking, who he's pulling off the shelf for the next fight. But, I don't think that he has quite the same range of wins over all-time greats that some of those guys back then had.
I've got a couple of quick points I'd like to make. Number one is that, barring a loss, Mayweather will be on all-time list on BoxRec higher than Muhammad Ali.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly...
No, he's already above Muhammad Ali. I don't know what BoxRec's list is, but they do it off of points. And Mayweather currently
they use the
sits
ELO.
at number 3.
Yeah, and a loss sets you back a lot.
He's at 7 currently.
Right, but if you look at the point system,
Mm-hmm.
Mayweather's points are way higher than the 4 guys above him.
Because those points aren't fixed yet.
Fair
He'll
enough.
go higher than Ali.
Yeah, he may well do if everything pans out as expected. But if certain people go on to have dramatically different scores, then his ELO will alter and he'll lose points basically.
All right, and my second point was that I'd completely disagree with everything that Adam said.
Everything.
Adam said hello, and he disagreed with that.
No. I disagree with what he was saying about rating him alongside guys like Robinson and Leonard, for the reason that those guys are either dead or have been retired for 30 odd years. When we're in our 70s, the argument on whatever social media there will be, when you have all these idiots saying, "Oh, they don't make them like this anymore," even for guys like Tommy fucking Morrison, they say shit like that. Wait till Mayweather's been retired for 30, 40 years. People will be saying he was the best there's ever been.
I totally agree, because people are already saying that, and I think that sentiment will only continue to grow.
No,
I think those people will be misguided, as they are today, and will be then.
Yeah. There's a saying, it's called, you don't know what you've got until it's gone. And that's the case with Mayweather. Once he's gone, and that's it.
This is analysis by hashtag, unfortunately. Just because you put TBE at the end of your fucking Instagram post doesn't make you the best ever. And it's also a classic case of what we call recency bias, that you've seen the man in the ring dozens of times because you're a contemporary of his. You've watched his fights as he's gone on in his career. You've been amazed, like I have and all of us have, at how he's dealt with it. But, you didn't watch Sugar Ray Robinson. You probably didn't watch Sugar Ray Leonard, because none of us are old enough, except for, the fights we've watched on YouTube or whatever. And so it's easy to point to that and say, that guy is the best that I have seen ply his craft on a regular basis. And he is. But that doesn't necessarily make him the best of all time. And
but the problem there, and which is like Dean's point is the opposite, which is that people have seen him and they've also seen what he's done outside of the ring, and he's not regarded as that there's no recency bias. In fact, the recency bias goes against Mayweather, and it works against him right now. And over time, when people forget about all of the out-of-ring antics and how he imitated Jeff Jarrett outside of the ring, that that his standing will actually increase.
I'm saying that Dean is suffering from recency bias, not that boxing fans as a whole. I think that boxing fans as a whole try to put him down a notch because they say that he ducked a fight with, Margarito or Paul Williams or whatever bullshit, or try to say that he was afraid of Manny Pacquiao.
No, he was afraid
a
of
few
Vladimir
years
Klitschko.
earlier.
Come on,
right?
Yeah.
So a lot of other people are, it cuts the other way. But I think that Dean's suffering from recency bias because he sees the guy and he sees him in the ring and how amazing he is, and he says that guy must be the best ever because he's right in front of my eyes.
Yeah, it is weird that within sort of the boxing fandom, it does feel that there's a sort of depression that permeates the general tone. Everything's not as good as the past used to be. Everyone currently is overrated. The sport's dying. It's spiraling into badness. I don't know what that is. There's something about boxing that attracts pessimists, or how this happens. But in most sports, people tend to agree that the champion or reigning champion or highest rated people of today's era are leagues ahead of the old school because of improvements in technique, training, and all those sorts of things. Whereas boxing's the polar opposite. Everyone's convinced that no one of this era is good, or it's a money spinning scheme that is poor entertainment, poor sport, anti-competitive. It's dying. I don't know where this negativity comes from, but it seems to be a broad theme that sort of crosses across every element of boxing.
I think boxing's roots in the lower class. You think about lower class people, and they're just pessimistic people because life's kind of kicked dirt in their face everywhere they go. There's not a ton of money in the lower class and all of that stuff. And I think that sort of culture that was created long time ago has just always stuck around, and it's just become the culture of boxing.
So you think that the innocence of childhood compared with the difficulties and responsibilities of adulthood means that everything they watched in their formative years were sort of rose-tinted because those years were the good years, and that now they got to make rent and there's all these horrible things, everything's horrible, including the boxing that's happening.
Right, and this is where the trouble comes for me, is that I love everything. I love all boxing. I'm going to watch Mayweather Berto just as happy as I'm going to be when I watch Cotto Canelo. But one of the things, back to Dean's point, I don't know which side I lean to. In fact, I hate these conversations of the past where we got to look at, who was better, Archie Moore or Floyd Mayweather. Really, it doesn't matter because there's no way to compare. We're comparing Floyd Mayweather, a welterweight who came up from super featherweight, to guys who fought at heavyweight their entire career. It's not comparing apples to apples each time. Yeah, the craft is the same, but it doesn't work. And for me, I think over time, Mayweather, at least in my eyes, has, and in watching YouTube videos of the old guys and all that stuff, he's amongst the top guys I've ever seen in the ring. You take Mayweather's best fight and compare it to Muhammad Ali's best fight and Sugar Ray Robinson's best fight and Joe Louis's best fight, and I can't tell you amongst like the very best who's better.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I think what's interesting about boxing is it's probably the sport that's, I don't know if the easiest, but among the easiest to compare present to past because the rules haven't really changed, because there haven't been, major advances in sort of schemes or statistics, those kinds of things. Like I think a lot of people would say, well, the 2014 San Antonio Spurs would beat the 1968 Celtics, and not because they're individually better players necessarily, although a lot of them are, but because the schemes and statistics and pick and rolling them to death, all that stuff we've advanced so much in the sport from a sort of strategy perspective that the 2014 teams would be, you probably have a lot of playoff teams that would win a series against the 68 Celtics. So it's more comparable than a lot of sports because so much has stayed the same. But ultimately,
and yet there's more argument.
Yeah, of course.
You've got to weigh in on the same day, do 15 rounds. I don't know. I just think that there's lots of differences as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, Simon. Weighing in on the same day.
8-ounce gloves.
8-ounce gloves. Your thumbs aren't attached.
There's people who made their reputation on being particularly good at cutting weight and beating up little people in a different set of rules. If you're weighing in differently, whether it's the same day and having narrow weight classes and things like that, you're in a different era. You're not going to be the same fighter.
So are you saying that Chavez Jr. wouldn't be an all-time great if he existed 30 years ago?
Well, but
It's
maybe
implied that
a
he
more
is now.
interesting question is I think most people, once Vladimir Klitschko retires, probably wouldn't put him above a Joe Louis or a Rocky Marciano. But if you put those guys head to head in their primes against one another, I'd probably take Vlad every time
I
because he's
wouldn't
so
take
much bigger.
anybody over Vlad.
Yeah, he's
Just
so much
because
bigger. He's so much stronger, and so the sport has changed. It's not to say that
Foreman.
it hasn't, but
Foreman.
Foreman, you think Foreman over Klitschko?
Yep.
The same guy who says Mayweather over Robinson? Sorry,
Foreman.
I don't understand. What's your justification for picking Foreman over
the two greatest fighters of
Klitschko?
all time are Floyd Mayweather and Vladimir Klitschko. Apparently,
To me, wait, what? Where did that
What's
come
the
from?
I thought
That's
the
what-
argument named somebody who would beat him, so I said Foreman.
Yeah, so you think that Foreman would beat Klitschko? That's interesting. If you're listening, I'm curious to see what you think. Would Foreman beat Klitschko? Simon, what do you think?
No, I don't think that's remotely competitive. I mean, which Foreman, firstly, but
The
and
really
then
fat
which
one or the
Vlad?
really
Young
like
Foreman.
or the one with hair?
Well, look, young Foreman probably beats young Vlad, but Mean Machine, Manny Stewart version of Vlad. I don't see a lot of people getting by him.
Prime. I mean, Foreman's 6'3".
Yeah, but he hits like a train.
Yeah, people
So
who are
did Tommy
also
Morrison.
6'3".
come on, are we comparing Tommy Morrison's power to George Foreman now?
Shut up, Adam.
Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, I mean,
Want to see how
your
he came
power,
back from that one.
Straying from the
power
point.
needs to be able to connect, but yeah,
Straight-
we're getting off topic.
What is Mayweather's his best weight, his natural weight? Would you say welterweight?
No,
I would say
lightweight.
that
No.
at lightweight and even as super featherweight and lightweight, I've never seen anything like Mayweather in those weight classes. The amount of speed, he was in the absolute matrix at those divisions.
Would you pick anybody at lightweight in history above Mayweather?
Like in a fight head to head?
Yep.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
would,
tough.
pick-
Maybe Chavez.
I would just never bet my money on that fight. I couldn't do it.
Would you pick anybody at welterweight above him?
Yes.
Robinson doesn't count. Robinson was a middleweight.
Well,
Okay, well,
I'd
if
take
Robinson's gonna
I'd
be
take either
middleweight-
Sugar Ray over him.
Nah.
What is your fascination with Leonard? He fucking lost to Hagler.
At 160 when he was old with a detached retina when he won anyway? Yes, I
He
guess.
would've got beat. He ducked Aaron Pryor, just like you're ducking me.
Yeah, but Aaron Pryor was not even in the same division. He was actually smaller.
Still would have beat
And
him.
Pryor was a cheater. He didn't even cheat the right way. You got to cheat with plaster in your gloves, not with juice. I don't think that at welterweight there's anybody that's a clear favorite over Mayweather. You might point to Leonard's speed and his movement as something that would give Mayweather problems, and you might even point to Tommy Hearns' length and power as something that could trouble Mayweather. But to really favor these guys over Mayweather, that's tough. I mean,
See,
who
the
else
thing
is
with-
there? There's Emil Griffith, there's Henry Armstrong. None of these guys are just clear favorites over Mayweather.
The thing with him is, I'm on his box rate profile now, and he's fought 375 rounds in his career, right? You could argue that he's probably won well over 80% of those rounds.
Absolutely.
sure.
I think you can go up to 85 and say Mayweather's won 85% of the rounds that he's fought.
And then 48 fights, right? Every single one of those fights has been at Mayweather's pace. He has forced every single one of them to fight his fight. People have tried to step it up, but they haven't been able to maintain it, because once he adjusts, that's it. Game over. He's got you.
Well, I think you could make the argument that there isn't a more, I don't even know if it's intelligent, but there's no fighter that's been able to adjust in history the way Mayweather has and then take over a fight however he chooses to.
The closest Mayweather was to losing was one round, and that was against De La Hoya. But
What?
that Yeah.
You mean Mosley?
If one of those judges would have given one more round, it would have been a split draw.
Those
Well,
judges were crazy, though.
Castillo was obviously the closest fight. Mosley
Right.
was
Yeah.
the one he was closest to actually losing because he was hurt. But yeah, I mean,
Well, yeah.
but you're obviously right that he's one. I think that it's fair to say that strategically, he's probably, among the most genius boxers of all time. And part of the reason that maybe he doesn't, in my mind at least, rise to the level of a Sugar Ray Robinson or even Sugar Ray Leonard is just that he doesn't quite have the same resume of all-time greats that he's fought and won against the way that some of those guys have. So yeah, I'd take Leonard. I certainly would take Robinson over him. I'd take Leonard too. Leonard's taller. He's got just as much speed. He's got more power. There are definitely a few guys at welterweight that I'd take. But if you go down south of that, if you're talking lightweight, yeah, that's sort of prime Mayweather there. Although he was only there for a few fights. He only fought there, I don't know, 4 or 5 times or something. But that's like peak Mayweather at that weight.
Well, if in some bizarre reason in 20 years' time we're still doing this fucking podcast, then you can tell me that Mayweather's not the best of all time in 20 years' time. But I won't believe you if you say it in 20 years' time. Because as time goes by, more people are going to rate him highly. Once he's gone,
So you think
gone.
public opinion is what's going to merit it?
Well, 20 years is not enough time, I could tell you that.
Merit what?
Well, that you'll think that it's proven that he's the best of all time when the public at large start to believe it.
No, I already think he is. But look at the people in the argument for it now. They're either dead or have been retired for the best, at least a quarter of a century.
But like, if you ask a general cross section of the public who the best boxer ever is, many of them will answer Mike Tyson. So I don't know what level of trust we should put in general public conception.
Well, this just in boxing, and that's just because that's the last big guy that people knew. If you ask him, any American, and probably around the world, who's the best basketball player, they're going to say Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's like actually true, that is the best basketball player of all time, although LeBron is on his way.
Well, he is the best boxer ever. The best boxer there's ever been.
Well,
I don't think there's any doubt about it. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Isn't that
Mike Tyson's the best boxer ever?
No, Mike Tyson's the best.
Mayweather. Mayweather is the best boxer there's ever been.
Yeah, but that's not really the question. I mean, that's a different question.
It's not.
Yeah, you're stressing it in a way that, and to be honest, if you said who's the best brawler of all time, it'd be difficult to answer because styles aren't usually that clearly defined.
I thought Ricky Hatton's style was pretty clearly defined.
The idea is to hit and not get hit. That's what boxing's about, and nobody does it better.
Boxing's about winning, and obviously one way to do it is to hit and not get hit. Another way is to get hit and hit the other guy harder than you got hit, which is what you see from
brain damage.
Yeah, sure,
but with brain damage and in a wheelchair and with fucking pugilistic dementia.
Let's so we gotta start wrapping this up. The one thing I wanted to ask you guys though is 1 week from now, this fight's gonna be over, and assuming that Mayweather does retire, what does boxing look like without Floyd Mayweather?
Very bad if Canelo can't beat Cotto.
What?
All right, go on, Dean.
If Cotto beats Canelo, then it's going to fuck up a lot of things in the sport. For a
How
start,
so?
Well, he's the biggest young name in the sport. If he gets a loss to Cotto, then he's not going to get a rematch with Cotto, and then the older boxer has beat the young star. There's not going to be a standout star.
Well, yeah, that's
I think you might have too much weight on Canelo.
Well, that's assuming that Canelo is the next guy, to cross over and be the big star of the sport. In which case, losing to Cotto would be pretty detrimental.
Or who else? Golovkin?
Well, Golovkin's kind of old. I love Golovkin as much as everybody else does, but he's not in this conversation because his length of time that he has as a top fighter in the sport is very short. I would be shocked if Golovkin was still at the top of the middleweight division in 3 years from now.
Yeah, that's fair.
You could project where you think certain guys right now in the pound for pound list are going to be, and there's only 2 guys out of there that I'd actually put my money down on being around there in 5 years' time, and it'd be Canelo and Crawford.
See, this generation has been defined by extremely dominant elite champions in certain standout divisions. So your Vlads, your Mayweathers, people like that are shaping this era. But you are resting all the hopes on boxing being good in replicating that in the next era and who the next guy is. But boxing hasn't always had runaway champions defining divisions, and sometimes the most popular periods of a division's history are when there's 3 or 4 people that are of similar skill level and no one's the particular standout star at the time. Retrospectively, you look at the Alis and people like that, but at the time it feels like there's a lot of big names and close fights within that. So you don't need Canelo to be a standout runaway champ in order to preserve boxing. It could just be that we're going through a shift to a new epoch where it's going to be the new lay of the land is that there's a few divisions where there's a number of people with interest in stuff. But I mean, you've got people like Crawford, I think, are going to start shaking things up in time to come. Some of the lighter weights with I think Britain's got a number of people that are en route to shake up the world scene. So I've got every confidence that it's going to be as exciting tomorrow as it was yesterday and is today.
Well, I'm talking as call it a casual. A casual look is going to be that once Mayweather is gone, then it's not got that same draw to it.
Yeah, just the boxing's dying thing, though, isn't it? Once Mike Tyson's gone, there's no standout guy.
But it will. It probably did. It will. That's always going to happen. That will always happen when the number one guy goes.
But before Mayweather, the big guy was Oscar De La Hoya, and Oscar De La Hoya didn't have a flawless record. There are two. What keeps boxing vital, what makes it popular, what builds the sport, is having good big fights. And there are 2 ways to do that. One is the sort of superstar way to do it. The Floyd Mayweathers and Manny Pacquiao's, the guys who at their prime seem like indestructible forces, and
which
you want
is
to
how
see
it's been going for 20 years.
Yeah, but you want to see, can anybody actually step up to them and win? But there's another way that Simon's talking about, which is to have really good competitive fights between a bunch of different people. And so it's certainly possible. Let's say Canelo loses that fight and he doesn't get on that superstar track. Well, then we have, a bunch of interesting fighters coming up. You've got, Lomachenko and Verdejo and, obviously some of the Brits, Anthony Joshua, all the other folks who we think that might be able to step up to that kind of world level, and seeing what that race looks like of who can get to that mountaintop quicker and who can look better getting there. That's as interesting to a lot of people as there is having the one fighter that's taking on all comers and winning. So I think that in the long run, boxing will be fine over a long period of time. Boxing has been fine. It's not dead today. It's not going to die anytime soon. Having a superstar helps. It helps to get into the kind of casual discussion. But I don't think it's the only avenue there. And so I don't really worry about boxing's vitality in the future. I think, over any kind of time period, we'll be back to where we were before, either with some superstars or with some really good competitive fights.
Boxing will be fine. It's always going to be fine. The only way to really cause a dent is if there's some major controversy, which could happen, but I don't foresee it happening. But the special feel that it has when a Mayweather fight happens, when a Pacquiao fight happens, or just the way it took over everything when Mayweather and Pacquiao finally fought, that's a completely different way. That transcends everything, and that's not happening when Mayweather retires, and it's not going to happen for a while until somebody really beats Pacquiao in a way that's gets everybody's attention, because he's the only guy that's left. Even Canelo beating Cotto, I don't know that creates the superstar in Canelo that Mayweather got created out of beating De La Hoya.
It'd have to be Golovkin.
Golovkin's not going to be a star by beating Lemieux.
No.
If Canelo beats Golovkin?
Yeah, that's the way to make him a standout star.
Maybe.
That's what you do.
Maybe. That it's still tough, because how many people are going to know enough about Golovkin to know that win is unbelievable and definitely warrants Canelo as a superstar.
I think the day after, everyone will know and everyone will be a retrospective expert, which is how it usually works.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, but I think you also have to keep in mind that in recent years, the only fight that was sort of two fights that were kind of major standouts above the million, give or take a few 100,000 pay-per-view buys were Mayweather Canelo and Mayweather Pacquiao. And those two are really kind of outliers, though. If you look at it, most of the big fights are around that 1 million mark. You get sort of on the high end with a Mayweather Cotto type. You get sort of on the low end with, I don't know, Pacquiao Marquez or something. But those kinds of fights will always be there. I mean, Canelo Cotto is going to be that kind of fight. That's going to be a big fight that's going to get a lot of pay-per-view buys. It's going to have a lot of interest.
It doesn't do those numbers, though.
Well,
those might be outliers, but
you don't think it does a million?
Cotto doesn't do that stuff. No, we're talking outlier numbers. A million, I mean,
no,
in fact, a million would be an outlier for this pay-per-view because I don't think Cotto doesn't do a million by himself. Marquez doesn't do a million. Nobody does a million, not consistently, and nobody gives these breakthrough numbers like Mayweather does.
I guess my point is that those kinds of fights, the big but not monumentally huge fights, are kind of always there. And it's that superstar model that if Canelo beats Cotto, he might sort of get to. That's a relative rarity. We think of it as something that's regular because we've seen it regularly over the last handful of years with Mayweather and Pacquiao to a lesser extent. But that's sort of more the outlier than those kind of million-person fights that happen relatively frequently. And the other thing to keep in mind is one of the reasons that Floyd Mayweather had a name that was as big as it was is because there was a foil that he had for years in Pacquiao that people were wondering, are they going to fight? And I think people watched both of those fighters to figure out what the path was for them meeting. And so, even if Canelo wins, it's not clear that outside of Golovkin, there's another fighter that can be that kind of foil, that can give him the sort of opposition, the test, the challenge that would bring him up to that superstar level. So I don't think we're going to see something like a Mayweather or Pacquiao style superstar in the sport in the very near term. But I'm not sure that that's a huge downside for boxing if we have a bunch more of these sort of, I hesitate to call them mid-level because obviously those are big fights, but if we have a bunch of these mid-level fights that take a while to sort out before you find that next person.
I'm not happy that you disrespected Liam Smith like that. Go.
Just before I get onto it, I think it's quite sad that nobody has mentioned Andre Ward as being the next star of the sport. 'Cause it's just funny because he's quite easily up there for being one of the best, if not the best, once Mayweather's gone. But he's never going to be a star.
No.
Right. Anyway, my point I did want to make was if you could rank the top 3 Mayweather performances, what would they be? For me, it'd be his third best would be his win over Canelo. Number 2 would be the Pacquiao win. And the first one would be over Corrales.
That's a good list.
What about you
pretty
guys?
good.
Have a drastically different one?
I don't know about drastically different. I feel like we sort of overlook it because it wasn't that interesting a fight, but that win over Juan Manuel Marquez,
That's the one I was
especially
gonna
when we saw what Marquez did after that fight. At the time, people thought, oh, well, Marquez was jumping up in weight and, he was sort of outgunned. Floyd didn't even try to make the weight limit for that fight. But the way that he just dispensed with an obvious Hall of Famer and an all-time great in his own realm in Juan Manuel Marquez, I think is probably more impressive than a young Canelo. As great as I think Canelo is and will be, that fight to me was maybe more impressive. But yeah, it's a pretty good list.
All right, you disagree with Dean or Adam? Send in your own list. This is it for this episode, and we have another one coming this week with our normal, regularly scheduled podcast with all the other news and not all about Mayweather Berto, which I'm sorry, Berto, we didn't talk about you that much. We'll talk about you more on the other episode. Thank you for listening. You can subscribe to us on iTunes or Stitcher. You can send us emails at podcast@SundayPuncher.com. Also, check out the calendar. If you haven't put it in your phone, you got to put it in your phone. It's a calendar which will update constantly with whatever televised fights you've got coming up, so you're never out of the loop with boxing. All right. Thank you for listening.